Hello, my friends. I, Forum Patel, would warmly like to welcome you all to the fifth session of the Trade Unions Act under the Labour Laws. Now, my friends, let's have a quick recap of the previous session. So, in the previous sessions, we did discuss about the rights, privileges, and the liability part of a registered trade union. In that, I clubbed three sections which talks about the immunity which is available there with the registered trade unions. So, what are these immunities and what do you mean by these immunities? In this session, we shall be talking about this immunity and also the amalgamation process of a registered trade union. So, friends, let's get started. So my friends, when we are talking about the immunities which is there available to a registered trade union, as you can see on the screen, there are three sections, section 17, 18 and 19. So these sections provides the immunity, that means the protection from any liability part that is falling for the registered trade union, or rather from any proceeding that has been taking place in the court of law. So, section 17, my friends, it confers the immunity from the liability in the cases with regard to the criminal conspiracy under section 120B of the IPC committed by an office bearer or a member. However, this immunity is partial in a sense that it is available only with respect to the legal agreements which are created by the members for the furtherance of the valid objective of the trade unions as prescribed by under section 15 of the act. The immunity cannot be claimed for an act of an office act that is an offense. That means, my friends, that these immunity are not the protection even if they do any criminal act. That means, my friend, that if a person, if an office bearer is doing any act, or rather if it is of the nature of the offense, then that person will not be having the immunity under this act. But if that person is doing certain act as a part to further enhance the objective which has been laid by a registered trade union, then that activity, my friends, would be protected by section 17 under the immunity part. So, in the case of the West India Steel Company Limited, in 1990 in Kerala, a trade union leader, he obstructed a work inside the factories for 5 long hours while doing the protest, of course, against the deputation of a workman to work under another section. Now it was held that while in a factory the worker must submit to the instructions which has been given by the superior. Now a trade union leader has no immunity against the disobedience of that particular order. So the trade union leader or any worker does not have any right which has been given by the law to share the managerial responsibility, my friends. That means when the activity of the working hours is going on, the leader is not having immunity even if he has worked for the protection of the rights of its own workers, my friends. That means that the immunity is available when you are acting in the furtherance to the objective which has been laid down under the registered trade union. But if that act is obstructing, or if it is of the nature which is creating the offense in any of the manner, then, my friends, this immunity will not be there with that particular office bearer. This was held under the West India Steel Company Limited versus Aziz in 1990 in Kerala. Now let's talk about the next section, that is section 18, which talks about the immunity available to a registered trade union from the civil proceedings in certain cases, of course. So my friends, in general, a person is liable in torts for inducing any other person to breach his own contract of the employment, or for interfering with the trade or business of any other person. However, a trade union or its officer and its members are immune from the liability which are provided that such an inducement is in contempt or in furtherance of a trade dispute. That means, my friend, that if any trade dispute has arisen and if the person is acting in the furtherance of that particular trade dispute only, then the person will be having the liability not to be commenced or not to be prosecuted for any civil proceedings. But of course, my friends, let's keep in mind one thing, that this inducement should be lawful only. That means there will be no immunity available against the violence, threat or any other illegal means or activities that has been taking part or that has been happening by its members or any office bearer. So what are these civil liability or what are these civil wrongs that we are talking about? Then let's think of one of the things which is very common, that is strike. So if any employee is going on a strike or if doing a strike, then will they be held responsible under the civil proceedings? So the answer to this question was given in P. Mukund and others versus Mohan Kandi Parivartan in 1992. So it was held that the strike per se is not an actionable wrong. Further, it was held that the trade union, its officer and its members, they are completely immune against the legal proceedings linked with the strike of a workman by the provisions of these sections. So that means that can you then claim the damages which has been occurred due to that strike? So friends, no, you cannot claim the damages because of an illegal strike, or rather even if any action has been taken place. The employers in that case, they do not have the right to claim damages against the employers who are participating in the illegal strike. Now my friends, this was held in the Rohtas Industries Staff Union versus State of Bihar in the year 1963. That means that raises another questions in my mind, that if you are doing any physical obstruction or movement or creating any physical obstruction while any of the working is going on of a factory or of a company, and if you are showing your aggression to that, then can that be protected under this? So no my friends, then any such activity which is hampering the property or rather which is hampering the activity of the trade union, which is lawful of course, they cannot be considered, or rather in that case the immunity cannot be granted to those people. This was held in the Simpson and Group Companies Workers versus Staff Union in 1992. In that case, the limitations have been drawn very clearly, discharging the liability and of course the immunity which are available to the registered trade unions and its members. Moving to the next section my friends, that is section 19. Now this section is talking about the enforceability of an agreement. In India, an agreement is in restraint of a trade is void as per section 25 of the Indian Contract Act. However, such an agreement between the trade union members is neither void nor voidable. It is important to note that the right is available only to a registered trade union. An unregistered trade union must be following the principles of the general contract law. So, if you now recall the objectives that I gave when we started off the Trade Unions Act, I did talk about the immunity part. I did talk about the rights of a registered trade union. That is to protect the rights, or rather to give a little bit more immunity to the registered trade union, so that the awareness can be spreaded and we can have a proper channel of a registered trade union, and the whole organized unorganized sector can become organized in one of the ways. So my friends, to fulfill the objectives of the act, these immunity under this section has been provided to the registered trade unions. Now, let's move on to the next topic which we talked about in the rights and liability part. That is the amalgamation of the trade unions. So my friends, what do you mean by amalgamation? Amalgamation is a process where one or more, like two or more companies will be there together. Now, what is the nature after this amalgamation? Which is the section that talks about the amalgamation under the Trade Unions Act. So as you can see on the screen my friends, section 24 does talk about the amalgamation of the registered trade unions. Now it talks that any two or more registered trade unions may become amalgamated together as one trade union with or without dissolution or division of the funds of such trade unions, or either of any of them, provided that the votes of at least 1.5 of the members of each or every such trade union is entitled to vote, they are recorded, and that at least 60% of the votes recorded are in favor of the proposal. That means, my friends, that the whole amalgamation process, it talks in that way that the proper proposal has to be made with regard to the amalgamation process. Now the two trade unions, or rather two or more trade unions, they can become amalgamated and become one unit only after the due proposal and due acceptance of the proposal by its own members. Now this amalgamation may create certain changes or requirement of certain changes. So those changes have been clarified in section 25. So let's move on to section 25. As you can see on the screen, my friend, in the case of the change in the name of a trade union, a written notice in that change of the name must be signed by the secretary, and 7 members of the union, they are required to send it to the registrar of the trade union. In the case of an amalgamation proceedings of the trade union, written notice of an amalgamation must be signed by the secretary and 7 members of the trade union, which are required to be sent to the registrar. The trade union name should not match with the other trade unions' names. Of course, that is the overlapping, and then the application would be rejected. The registrar satisfied with all the requirements provided by the members of the trade union, then only it will change the name and the same will be entered in the register. If the registrar satisfies with all the requirement provided by the members of the trade union, it will validate the amalgamation proceedings and it will enter the name as amalgamated and as proposed by the members to the registrar. So that means, my friends, that once the amalgamation proceedings change, you have to make the whole proceeding, you have to follow the due process, and you also have to put it in the writing, or rather you have to give the changes as a written notice to the registrar so that the proper maintenance of the record has been done. So this was all about the amalgamation proceedings of the trade unions. Now, my friends, once the trade union is created, it has given its rights, privileges and obligations to its members. Then also the amalgamation proceedings is changed. Then what if the trade union needs to be dissolved? What is the procedure for the same thing? Let's move on to the next topic that talks about the dissolution of a trade union. Section 27 that talks about the dissolution of a trade union in a very precise way. It says that notice of dissolution signed by the secretary and 7 members of the trade union, it should be sent to the registrar of a trade union within 14 days from the date of the dissolution of the trade unions. Again, one point to be noticed, that is time has been given as a limitation, so that the limitation has been prescribed in the dissolution notice which is to be given to the registrar. Next point, if the registrar satisfies with the provisions and the rules which are followed by the members of the trade union for dissolution, he will confirm the dissolution, and the funds shall be divided by the registrar amongst its members if there is no rule which is mentioned by the trade unions in distribution of the funds. That means, my friend, when the whole trade union has been registered, the rules and the regulation was to be made under section 6, if you remember. So if the rules has been prescribed under that section, then they have to follow that rule. But if no such rule has been mentioned for the funds, then they have to be divided by the registrar amongst the members if there are no rules for the same thing, of course. So this was all about the dissolution of the trade union, or rather the effect of the dissolution of the trade unions. So friends, till now, as you can see on the screen, as we discussed in the very first session, we discussed about the history, objective and definition of the trade union. We discussed about the registration process of the trade union, that is section 3 to section 10, if you remember. Then section 11 talks about the appeal and cancellation of the registration, liability of a registered trade union, along with the liability, rights and privileges of a registered trade union. That emphasizing, or that gives a very good kickstart to the objective, or that puts a little feather to the objectives. It helps the objective to be fulfilled. Then the amalgamation process of a registered trade union and the dissolution of the same thing. So friends, in the next session, we shall be starting to discuss the collective bargaining, industrial relations and the classification of the trade union. So stay tuned till then and keep learning. Thank you.